Thank you for coming to Bologna. We are very pleased to host you in this site, which is the house of our academy. I will speak in Italian because there will be the translation into Chinese by our colleague from Canada, and we are pleased to offer our welcome in Chinese. Pertanto, cari colleghi accademici, grazie a tutti voi per essere intervenuti, grazie al professor Fujun per aver accolto il nostro invito. Con grande piacere accogliamo nella nostra accademia questo famoso professore dell'Università di Pechino. Il professor Fujun è anche un accademico corrispondente straniero della nostra accademia e visita Bologna per la prima volta. Confidiamo che possa apprezzare la bellezza e l'accoglienza della nostra città e anche della nostra accademia, che ha sede in questo palazzo del XVI secolo, impreziosito dai meravigliosi affreschi di Pellegrino Tibaldi nella Sala Ulisse. Grazie al professor Fujun, nel 2020, sotto la presidenza del professor Tega, l'Accademia ha sottoscritto un accordo in base al quale una serie di accademici bolognesi andranno a Pechino come visiting professors per svolgere lezioni in diverse aree multidisciplinari, che sono Population and Healthcare, Economic Growth and Poverty Alleviation, Climate Change and Environmental Protection, Education and Innovation. Questa importante collaborazione, che inizia con la visita del professor Fujun a Bologna, dovrebbe concretizzarsi dalla fine di quest'anno e a partire dal 2024. Il professor Fujun, che è docente di economia politica a Pechino, ci parlerà oggi di The Making of Metaheuristic Growth Theory, che trae lo spunto e cerca di rispondere a questa domanda: Why have some nations developed whereas others stagnated? Il professor Petroni, docente a Roma, accademico dei Lincei e nostro accademico effettivo, introdurrà poi il professor Fujun e il tema della conferenza. Please.
grazie mille. 欢迎大家，胡军教授，我们欢迎你来到波罗尼亚大学。我们很荣幸你能在我们大学演讲。我们很高兴你来意大利访问。我们非常高兴，非常欢迎北京大学胡军教授来到这边的很历史的学院。胡军教授第一次访问波罗尼亚，欢迎。我们相信你可以欣赏到意大利北方城市以及我们学院的美丽和热情的好客。学院位于这座16世纪的宫殿中 Ulysses 房间里装饰着 Pellegrino Tibaldo 的精美壁画。感谢教授。2020年，在Tega教授主持下，学院签署了一份协议，来自波罗尼亚的一系列学者将作为客座教授前往北京教课。人口与健康护理、经济增长和减贫、气候变化和环境保护、教育和创新，上述重要合作开始于傅军教授访问波罗尼亚，2024年开始显示。今天为我们带来 The Making of Metaheuristic Growth Theory 的演讲之中的题目带来一个问题：为什么有一些国家发展了，一些国家还没有发展？罗马教授 Petroni 教授为教授傅军教授，感谢。
And now, Professor Fujun, let me give you the diploma as a member of our academy. This is the diploma with your name signed by the president. And also
Thank
the
you very
symbol of the academy,
Okay.
you can put on your jacket. Okay. Perfect. Now we are an academic. Please, Professor Petroni.
Thank you so much. Grazie, Presidente. I will speak in English since my Chinese did improve in the last years as quickly enough as I would have expected. It's a pleasure to have Professor Hu Jun here. I think he is the first Chinese to be a member of our academy. And the fact he is a member proves the high level of academic life and research, which was attained by China. I'm not fond of classifications of universities, Shanghai, Quacquarelli, Times Literary, and so on. But anyway, we are proud in Bologna. Oh, you should be proud because I'm in Rome. I was 20 years professor here, so but now I'm a part of the University of Rome. But more or less the same story. And University of Bologna, University of Rome are more or less on the same ground, same level, around 150 position in the world. You say that's a bad result. Oh, there are 6,000 universities in the world which are classified. So that's not that bad. But Beijing University or Peking University, I remind that they changed the name of Peking in Beijing by the Chinese government, allow it to have a Peking University for the Peking University for keeping the old style. The Peking University is around 25th, 20 in the world. So we are now have the privilege of having a professor for one of the top universities in the world. It was the first Chinese university founded around 100 years ago. There is a story about Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong wanted to be a student. He wasn't not accepted, but he found a job as a librarian at University of Peking. If he had been accepted as a student, probably the history of the world would have been very different. You know, there are stories about that. You're looking, you know, story. So anyway, it's a pleasure and a honor to cooperate with University of Peking, not just because of the importance of China, but because of the very high scientific relevance of the University of Peking. In the University of Peking, Hu Jun is a professor of economics. He studied at Harvard University, where he got his PhD under the supervision of a bunch of wonderful guys. He went back to China, and at University of Peking, he ruled the section of the university in charge for government and economy, and he did found himself the South-South Institute, which was inaugurated personally by Xi Jinping. That may explain you the relevance of this initiative. And so is an excellent scholar, is a great organizer of academic life. Today he will come here, and he loves Italy, as we love China. And so the fact that he was accepted as a member of our academy, I think was one of the best things was during the last years. We have a completely new world to open to us. You know, mostly when we think to China, we think, of course, to business, to exchange of power, but there is another dimension, which is scientific dimension, which is growing. It's already there. It's not for the future. It's already there. It's growing. And I think as Italy, we have all the interest to have strong and stronger links with China about science. Today, our fellow and my personal friend Fu Jung will give a lecture about an argument which could seem quite quixotic in some sense. It's a crossing between economics, mathematics, physics. Well, we have Pierluigi Contucci here that was part of this enterprise who will comment on this. And then in some sense, I'm speaking like as a philosopher. Walter Tecker will understand me. In some sense, we go back to the 19th century, when in social sciences and economics, they try to explain phenomena picking instruments from physics. Thermodynamics that time was not so much developed, but you could find Newtonian mechanics used for explaining social phenomena. For example, somebody say that trade between two countries, you take country A, country B, and the volume of trade was directly proportional to the mass, which means to the product of the two countries, and multiplied by the inverse square of the distance between the two countries. So it's not the first time that there is the tendency to use instruments from physics, mostly, and from natural sciences to look into social sciences. What Fu Jung will do is an attempt in this direction, of course, in a more ingenious way and not so naive way as it was in the 19th century. So please, I'm glad and honored to give you the floor. Please go there because you have the microphone there.
Thank you, President Rondi, for this very, very high honor for me to be here. I know how significant it is in my career as an academic. While in this place, I know Bologna is where Universitas, the Italian way, the universe of Earth originated. So as a scholar, I think this is a great honor for me to be here, especially in this magnificent building where you over there. I also see the great pictures of Ulysses or Odyssey symbolizes to me when you imagine a life of a serious scholar. It's a difficult life, but there are heights you have to scale, not to be distracted by the things around the law. You have to be so focused. So with these comments, let me begin with my presentation. Usually when I do presentation, I do not use slides, but for this particular occasion, because I would start with some very critical elements and also be formulate them in mathematical forms, very abstract. So words would fail. So I use slides in the hope that that can help us and help me to go through my presentation. As you can see, the title is The Making of Metaheuristic Growth Theory. The key ingredients, math formulas, and the empirical test. And I'm a great beneficiary of the three things: Republic of Letters, as an educated person, in conversation with you, Republic of Letters, now across national borders. Then another key concept is the invisible college. We graduated probably from one college, but in the spirit of seeking truth, we continue to pursue the same thing as if the college continues to be there. But whatever we say, we need to pursue that in the spirit of truth. So we subject of whatever we say to open science. So in the same spirit, I'll do my presentation. Basically, if you look at comments, very simple things, 4 things, actually 3 key ingredients, the kind of the critical building blocks that I will deal with so that I can compose them together in such a way that eventually we find a unified critical framework that we can explain why some nations developed, whereas others stagnated. And hopefully in that framework, that would allow me to look back into history, because we have to be sensitive to the initial conditions as humans, not just physics. But then when we turn around, look into the future, in the hope that the historical masses will become more rationalized. Can I face that challenge? Let's see. So the second part is to formulate that seemingly very messy stuff into what I would say simple and elegant mathematical forms. That sounds very exciting, but at the end of the day, since we have to subject whatever we say to empirical testing, empirical observation, so I will do empirical test. Well, the list of tests we can do will be very long, but for the time's sake, I will just demonstrate 3 or 2 to you to see whether my framework will support the hypothesis that I have. And I will end by a very brief recap of the underlying grammar of my theory, those invisible stuff. To me, the invisible stuff are more important in the spirit of Galileo than the things that we can see with our naked eyes. And I will end by looking back to give you a sense of how I get here. It's been a long journey, longer than 10 years that took Odyssey. For me, it's probably 20 or so years. But it's hard. I enjoyed every part of it. The first part, ingredient parts. Let me start with some key concepts and underlying philosophy. Now, first, the key term, metaheuristic, very key term. I pondered a lot about what is the best word that I should use to express the unifying theoretical framework I'm going to set up. And I then I think of Greek terms, meta, transcend the physical world, going up, at least you have a sense of direction, not going down to the earthly world. Heuristic, inductive, indeterministic, historical, there you can never be precise. But by putting the 2 words together, you have a sense of going from a rough estimate to more precise things. In other words, when you see this world in terms of range measures, increasingly converge towards point-to-point measures. And there will give you a sense of high quality, high energy. And that also indicates higher level of economic development. Now, if you watch the world around, roughly speaking, observation, you see that. More developed economies, higher level energy, the measurements, rough range, increasing to converge. We can never be to the point, because according to Euclidean, a point is that which has no part. This is impossible in this real world, but that's the direction. Then that corresponds to a very deep philosophical concept that I also learned from a Greek philosopher. 2 terms, logos, universal, constant truth. Even though now we use logos in a very relaxed way, but when they talk about logos, it's constant truth, quote unquote. Another word is rima, instant truth. Okay, it's very ad hoc. This is universal, this is particular, okay? double standard of truth. For most people, probably they care more about particular truth. They care about the long particular problems they face in their life on this earth. But as scholars, can we unify those so that knowledge becomes more certain? If knowledge is not certain, it's experience. We need to elevate experience to a higher level that we call new knowledge. And incidentally, in this part of the world, the Western part, you have great scholars like Immanuel Kant, who had his great concepts. It's called here, I said, synthetic a priori. It's more mathematical part. And the synthetic posteriori, Professor Tiger sort of nodded his head. So I become less nervous. He's a great philosopher of science, you know? So I'm probably traveling in the wrong way. Both part has strong suits as well as weak suits. The synthetic a priori, so up in the sky, but it's less so to deal with the particular concerns we have. If we deal with the particular concerns that we have every day, then we probably won't elevate. So we need to think of those. So these are some of the philosophical building blocks underlying the framework that we're set up, okay? Then in the courses that we take, okay, I'm so glad to converse very briefly with already a range of scholars representing different fields. One is more deductive, it's mathematical. The other is inductive, history. So mathematical history. And for me to explain economic growth, I need to look at both sides, okay, based on history, empirical evidence, but straighten up by the truth values of mathematics. When we do mathematics in English, at least, the choice that we use, in Chinese, we say correct, incorrect, but in English, we say true or false every step of the way. If you deal with the empirical world, you cannot say those words. You say probably. You can never be deterministic. So these are two parts. But to end up, one is the universal form, the other is particular contents. Well, if we decontextualize our framework too much, then it becomes less to do with the reality. But if we contextualize the framework too much, then we do not have the mathematical sharpness, determinism, so that we can elevate experience into the level of knowledge. At the end of the day, what probably counts is under the term abductive. Okay, you fuse the two parts, the deductive, inductive, and the key term that I use, at least, is asymptotic probability. In other words, we can never claim to have arrived at the truth, but can we be closer still? So with these, now talking about mathematics, the underlying philosophy of the modern mathematics to me is the fusion of three things, okay, which would allow us to appreciate logic, classic type, then the intuition. The three parts, logicism plus formalism. Logicism, for instance, Euclidean geometry, formalism, algebra, then intuitionism, topology. When you have a hypered up shape, so many divergences converge. At the tip of that, it can never be deterministic. So that gives space for very strong human intuition. And that actually is now embodied in this age of digital world. The beauty of digital twins. The same digits, if you look this side, the real world, this is sort of the data, massive data. But potentially, if you look this way, pure mathematics. So these are the subtle and the deep underlying philosophies that will support the theoretical framework that were set up. Okay? Keywords more specifically. When I set up my theoretical framework, I'm basically looking at 3 layers of courses. Okay? one shallow, immediate causes, the physical cause. A deeper, relatively deeper one is what I call institutional causes. Mind you, Adam Smith once said, market as an institution is an invisible hand. But I would also argue the state, the hierarchical power, is also invisible. It's very powerful, it's there, but the way, what principles you use to organize state is almost invisible to an average naked eye. Society, the culture, is also invisible, but with the social conventions are so powerful to shape your behavior. So the invisible layer. Then the invisible hand of the invisible hand is the way that you think. Okay, think of the ingredients that I give you. Very few people will be self-reflective enough to tell us what is the way that you process information. They usually use gut feelings, okay? Even when they use the word logic, they are really not talking about logic, okay? They use the word logic. So that is the deep part of the three layers. Let me say that again. Three layers of causes of wealth, okay? Physical, institutional, ideational. Now, to have that, a framework is so important because that would help we to observe the empirical world, okay? To organize. Now, this is sort of not the ordinary way people would do, but for great minds, like the minds of Einstein, this is the way. Einstein was saying, it is our theory that determines what we can observe. It's not just inductively, okay? Deduction is also very important. But then, for great philosophers of science, what are some of the criteria that you use if two theories are there competing with each other, explaining the same set of phenomena? And the philosophers of science, Angelo is one of the great philosophers. He probably say, okay, let's have a list to say, please be driven by or else be equal. Simplicity, consistency, no logical contradictions, then accuracy, okay? As I was hinting, range or point measures. Scope, the larger the better, not ad hoc way. Universally, it's better than the fruitfulness because we need to deal with the real world as well. Hopefully, if we have a theory, that theory can also be applied to address the particular concerns that we have, one nation have, other nations have. Come to the simple, elegant part, the mathematical formula of the foregoing. I sort of say that in everyday language. Now, philosophers would argue everyday language can only express opinions, not truth. Galileo, here, on this part of the world, early on reminded us, God used the language of mathematics to compose the universe. Isaac Newton also improved the mathematics. Then he came up with the calculus. Then his great book that changed the mindset of a few of this mankind, we call scientists at the time, used the mathematics very skillfully. So 2/3 of his book is driven by mathematics, mathematical propositions, true or false, true or false, true or false, every step of the way independent of the real world, the first line of investigation. Then the second line of observation, empirical evidence. And his way is try to let the two lines match. Now, if he see the degree of matchness that he feels comfortable, true knowledge, quote unquote, scientific knowledge that changed the way we, not all actually, I guess the members of this academy, we see the world. And from there, we human beings continue to penetrate deeper into nature, and you see the great divergence of wealth, the superficial stuff, across nations. Before that, in terms of GDP, we stayed more or less the same across nations. The size may be different, but then GDP per capita, it's about the same. If you do not believe, read history books again, okay? So this mathematical equation, it's not simple, but not simplistic, that fuse together three layers of causes that I mentioned. It's not. It's the physical cause. It says growth is a function, all else equal, it's a function of natural capital, land, human capital, labor, and the physical capital. All else equal. Okay? Then the second part. Then when you confuse the three things, you need to have a field. Okay? Do you mix them in water or do you mix them in air? The way Galileo was very sensitive. The great physicists also kicked the field out, then eventually they need to bring them back. So similarly, I need to bring in the physical field. But in my case, as a social scientist, the field is made of three dimensions, okay? It could be infinite, but let me lump the infinity together into three principal dimensions here. Institutional capital vertical. By that, I refer to the state, hierarchical, yeah? Institutional capital horizontal is the market. Market principle, everyone is equal. Nothing is there to coerce you, okay? And the third dimension sitting between the two is the community dimension, society. So in social sciences, at least in terms of disciplines that we are talking about of all the universities, you have a political science department, you have an economics department, and you also have a department of sociology, okay? But in a very strange way, scholars do not talk to each other, and I think it's wrong, okay? When I sit here, I can feel the shadow of power. I can feel the shadow of markets, okay? I can feel the shadow of a society, okay? You have your own culture here, okay? And that may have produced the different things than a different type of configuration. So I bring that up. And there you can never be communist. So obviously. But at least I give you a field that gives you a sense of probability, okay? Each dimension will suck in energy, okay? For us just to live on, we need to take in a lot of energy, okay? Think of the different configurations that will have different impact on the way we mix up land, labor, capital, okay? Then I put the T, okay? Then it's already 4 dimension. State, market, society, plus time, 4 dimension. So far, most economists, when they build models, 2 dimension. This is wrong. Okay. Then you tend to wonder, now, where do institutions come from? To me, eventually, it's human ideas. Even though you see interplays between institutions and human ideas, but deep down, I would argue, this part of the idea difference is the invisible hand of an invisible hand. So putting things together, and here is measured by happen. And if you use the big data set in the internet, even though rough measures, and you just plot them in, you can pretty much support what I claim, the hypothesis that I have. Now, this is sort of a complicated, but very close to the real world, okay? But as great thinkers, especially mathematicians, they are driven by simplicity and the consistency. If you think of our causality, very long causality, if we are religious, you believe in God, God is the first mover, then it gives rise to everything, you see? But you can take out the intermediate variables and sort of run the regression. You have this, then high correlates. Believe it or not, we can try that, okay? The same thing, but formulated in very elegant, simple terms by this part taking human capital, physical capital, as the derivatives of human ideas. So what is left is natural capital, nature, in interplay with the human mind, taking out the intervening variable. This is the ultimate recipe for economic growth. Okay? So I come to this. If your ideas become perfect, okay, 1 + 1, 0, anything divided by 0, infinite wealth. Now we have initial evidence coming, okay? If we are successful in the nuclear fusion, that means we solve the problem of energy, green energy, okay? As long as we have some minerals here, recycling, okay? And you see, we are sort of moving in that direction, okay? But of course, it's a wrong road, but we have initial evidence. The way I formulated the sort of complicated picture, I formulated that within a very simple range between 0 and 1, the digital world, okay? Descartes believed the whole universe can be reduced to 2 things, 0 and 1. At a time, very few people believe him. Now your life is driven by 0 and 1. Okay? Simplicity, elegance. To illustrate what tend to be a very abstract theoretical framework, let me illustrate by a holographic picture. My theory actually is a holographic, okay? Now imagine we are in the tunnel of time, traveling from history into the future. Okay. And here is the state, here is the market, here is the society, and the 3 dimensions will have different configurations. If you're all here, this is the central planning. If it's all here, it's all market without state, which is not true everywhere. United States is a pro-market economy, but the government is very huge, right? The community is there. But what counts is you have an optimal configuration, given those, and compare globally, such that as you move towards that, okay, towards finding a global optima, okay. Now, optima, the English term is very subtle, okay, not equilibrium. Optimal means it's not absolute equilibrium. It's a contingent equilibrium, contingent on many other things. But as your mind becomes very sharp, accuracy, you tend to converge range measures, increasingly towards point measures. Energy goes up, okay? So this would tell you for a nation, a country to move from history increasingly towards that. High energy, enclosing converged towards point-to-point measures. You have powerful evidence, at least initial evidence, to say that advanced countries, higher energy, higher quality. China is an emerging market sitting in the middle, then less advanced economies. So based on that, I said, okay, historical reason, mathematical reason, singularity, traveling the line of history. With that, let me give you 3 sets test to see whether we have empirical evidence to support what I claim, okay? Open science. Look at China, okay? Now, there are different debates about how to explain the very dramatic growth of China. Is the Chinese model unique? Or is it just a case of convergence the way I see it is a way of convergence if you put China into the forest of nations, okay? Every nation. This is the advanced part, the best performance. If you look at GDP per capita. Sorry for that. 50,000, okay? Average case, world norm, 13,000, okay? 40 years ago, okay? 40 or so years ago, when China started reform, okay? $156 US. We were behind many of Africa countries, okay? After 40 or so years, we have traveled, nudged forward through a program called domestically reformist system from central planning system, more towards the market system, okay? And by opening up so that we have better access to global knowledge, okay? We move from here to here, 12,000. There is still a small gap between global normal and us. The historical height of China 200 years ago was we had roughly 1/3 of the world's population. At the time, we were producing a little bit more than 1/3 of what we were here. So in a way, China was normalizing towards historical heights, okay, under the global system. And as you can imagine, there are still great potentials for us to further nudge forward, but there will be conditions. Now, the second test. As I told you, basically, we are talking about 3 sets of courses: physical, land, labor, capital, institution, and the ideational. Now, let me do a test to show the power of institutions, also the great potentials that China still have, okay, to bring out its potentials. Now, let me do a test by controlling what we have. Let me compare China with OECD countries, okay? Population-wise, China had 1.4 billion people, okay? OECD countries, you add up all countries, population was close to 1.4 billion people, so it's the same, okay? And if we add energy, now the underlying model is we impose thermodynamics, where energy is wealth and wealth is energy. You add the same amount of energy into the black box here in China. I borrow this because visually it's the same, you know? Energy, 2 black boxes, but underlying the physical cost, institutional cost, ideation, and physical cost. But we don't know which one is more precise yet. You added energy. And the equation side, wealth. Now, in the case of China, we now produce 12,000 US dollars per capita. OECD countries, 43,000. There is difference of 30,000 wealth that we need to explain, okay? Big difference, not difference in the margin, you know? So allowing for measurements, errors, and what have you, the causes are very likely institutional, not physical. Now that China has upgraded significantly in terms of sophistication, industrial sophistication of its manufacturing might relative to others, except the very few things at the very top that we cannot produce, okay? Everyday life stuff. China has become the powerhouse of manufacturing globally. So for us to explain the difference, we need to look at the difference in terms of the institutional setup. In other words, we need to continue to optimize the relationship between state, market, society in such a way that we can continue to unleash the potentials of growth, now holding ideas the same, okay? But I guess institution, the level of institution will have some association or linearity with the ideas. Long term, at least, it'd be very difficult to imagine that in a place where you have great minds, but they set up a lousy institution, it's very difficult to imagine. Okay, over time, the great minds will set up great institutions, and the great institution will be there to mediate the production function you have long term, given certain level of energy, okay, underlying that physical dynamics. So move on to the third test, okay? Using the simple equation that I give you, okay? Now, of course, it's very difficult to measure who is smart, who is not, but we can also, what we can do is to use proxies. The way I and my associates use the proxy is that we put up a data set that consists of fields prices, okay? The best minds pushing the frontier of human knowledge, including pure mathematics, okay? Then traveling down a little bit, science, Nobel Prize, connected to the way that Newton did. Mathematical principles of natural philosophy, okay? So the two parts. And still going down a little bit, engineering, okay? So it's going up, address particular human province. And that's the line that human mind are very creative eventually. Now, I map that, I sort of use that to map novel ideas, new discoveries, and the breakthrough technologies. Then I run a regression. GDP per capita and that data set. The R square is higher than the new classic economic models. New classic economic models, the R square is less than 80%, even though you use a long list of different things to control this and to control that. In my case, it's very simple, assuming the ultimate chain of causes, ideas, institutions, the physical stuff, then the wealth. You just take the middle intermediate variable to run the regression, R square over 22 or 82 R squares. So this is very, to me, it's very interesting, at least, for us to take ideas very seriously. And let me sort of add this section by quoting Keynes. He made a point, very strong point, when he said, the ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Sooner or later, it's ideas, not vested interest, which are dangerous for good and evil. Think about that. Now, let me conclude of this. Two parts. I would sort of sum up by highlighting the underlying philosophies that hold up the edifice, the theoretical framework that I have. Basically, there are three pieces, okay, that I conjugate together. A stands for the new classical model, proven by Arrow W, when they mathematically prove the existence of a general equilibrium of marketplace, proving that the market is efficient. Many Chinese economists reject that, okay? Thinking it's too abstract, not relevant to the reality. But in my case, I do not reject that. I continue to take that, line up in the future as the benchmark stuff, as the physicists take the speed of light as a benchmark stuff. Speed of light has nothing to do with our life. No matter how fast we run, we are so slow. But once we have that benchmark, we can rank people. You're a gold medalist, you're a silver medalist, you're a bronze medalist, even though compare your speed with the speed of light. Otherwise, we'll end up with arguments. No one will persuade others. It's all touchy sentiments. Okay, so I use that. The first one, it's just logical, it's deductive, it is mathematical reasons, as I said earlier when I started this talk. The middle one is the institutional one. It's a synthetic ex post. I'm talking about institutions. It is socially, historically embedded. It can never be precise. But as you configure by trial and errors, probably there is a group of global optima. We need to be sensitive. Okay. And lastly, I impose that model. The first one is classical model. The second one is unclassical model, like quantum stuff. By imposing the classical limits of thermodynamics, then I close the circle of this whole theoretical framework as if everything is operating within what physicists or mathematicians would call Hilbert space, where everything will be eventually converge to one, but never be there. And in the process, you see the energy goes up, efficiency goes up. And finally, I use that mark to denote, apply as to pure mathematics, okay? Because as economists explain economic growth, this is not pure mathematics. Many economists, when they do mathematical exercise, they tend to forget about that or not aware of that. But I want to make it explicit. In creating wealth, it's in the physical world. Okay, it's not just physical, it's biological. So when I use time, I will make that explicit. In economics, it is not physical time, it's a biological time. Okay. The last time, the difference between physical applied and opposed mathematics is very subtle, as I said here. The last point is subtle but crucial, reflecting the beauty of digital twins. Okay, we are in digital age now. As long as the pixel continue to rise, that is reflects the level of the knowledge, the discipline that you have approached. And the difference is where pure mathematicians study patterns of whatever, independent of the real world context. We, as social scientists, study patterns of economic growth that are necessarily dependent on real world context, so that, being aware of that, we have a chance to fuse historical reasons with mathematical reasons in the future. Now, how eventually I get here? The story is very long, but very simple. There was about 20 years ago, okay, around the start of this century, I had finished my PhD dissertation, and I was in the process of turning my manuscript into a book. And Robert Bates, one of my thesis advisors, a giant, intellectual giant in the field of political economy, got me in touch with Ronald Coase, who is a Nobel laureate in economics.
Was a friend of mine.
Okay.
He died at 102 years ago. Very old man, yeah.
It's a small world. Everyone is connected, you know. And he subsequently gave me generously of his time and his comments. He said very good things about the thesis that I wrote. Excellent job, second research, because at the time I also engaged in statistical analysis to sort of test the hypothesis of institutions that tend to be invisible. I sort of do the inverse problem of physics. So this is the letter that he wrote. He passed away, so I still keep a copy of that. And this is the book that I wrote, The Institution, eventually. And among the things he told me, now at the time, he said, Fujun, institutional economics is a very promising research agenda in a very low-key way. He was the flag bearer of that field, winning a Nobel Prize. He also said, Fujun, you know, my approach is basically historical, inductive. But he challenged the young scholars. He said, eventually, that scholarship need to be formalized. In other words, we need to use mathematics to increase rigor, to make it more scientific. The later part, formalized part, I did not take that to my heart at the time. I was more interested in his praise of my work than anything else as a young scholar. But looking back, it is amazing. His word has stayed with me, has been staying with me on and off for the rest of my career. And this is the work that I present to you, and I thank you very much. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie. Thank you for sure for this wonderful lecture, which of course will solicit the comments. You know, in our academy, we have two classes, natural sciences, moral sciences. But what is interesting in your lecture is eliciting the interest of both classes. Ronald Coase, he lived until 102 years old. He wrote his last book, he was 100 years old, and he wrote his book about China, by the way. I remember. And he was a lawyer. He was not an economist. He was trained as a lawyer. And during the Battle of England, Second World War, and he was defending London with his pluck. And while he was waiting for German planes, he was thinking about transaction costs and allocation costs. So, and he came out with everything you have now in the trading of emissions, Kyoto arrangements derived from this guy and from George Stigler. You should not remember about that. And so what you say about these are not, I just say, these are not just abstract things. The issues about the tariffs on emissions derives from Coase and from Stigler. So theory and practice. So I'm glad now to open the discussion from all our members. Please. Well, Luigi, you are doomed to talk. Or you can come. Oh, yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks for this very interesting and illuminating seminar. This theory is really impressive in all the respects. I have no question that can be dealt on during a conference, because what I like, as you know, is to go deeper in details and like a frog looking from close by the grass and trying to understand the very small details before going up. But one thing I can say that it's a spoiler, it's not a question, it's a comment in anticipation of what I'm going to do with Fujun and co-workers. The parallel that you are tracing with the second principle of thermodynamics is extremely stimulating. What I would like to understand better is the identification of terms and what form, as we were discussing earlier, what form of the second principle of thermodynamics are you thinking of while you write your equation? In particular, there must be something that plays the role of temperature. Why do I say that? Because what you plot, the empirical tests that you have made are in a way tests on efficiency of an engine. And we know that in thermodynamics, the efficiency of an engine is at most the one that the second principle of thermodynamics predict. You cannot build any engine more efficient than one that is that you may compute a priori using the temperature of the two sources in which the engine works, the cold and the hot temperature. So here I see a very interesting road ahead, identifying what is temperature and the exact shape of the second principle that you want to investigate, because there are many different forms that the second principle of thermodynamics manifests itself. Very short comment for the audience that may be interesting. There is an encyclica papale, so the Pope wrote at the beginning of last century an encyclica, one of Vatican City important statements, where he claims in the introduction of the encyclica that the second principle of thermodynamics is the highest and best law of physics. And he is, did you know this, Angel? Yeah, you have it. And he concludes, of course, like a Pope, that this is a proof of the existence of God. He said so, and of course that we take it as law, what he says. But just to say how pervasive is the idea of efficiency and entropy increase and so on. And it's very nice to see it appear in economics and application to political economy. Thank you very much again.
Very, very, very profound question, saying so profound, and somehow we need to deal with the theology, you know. We need to think of, if we assume it's a complete system, then it's self-contained, and if it's self-contained, there is no space for God. So there must be some loopholes so that we can imagine something above that. So as long as we deal with the physical world, it has to be there. Even when we deal with the pure mathematics, we still see two sets of loopholes. One is at the fringe of mathematics, when you're dealing with the axioms. What is behind the axioms? So one set, incomplete. The other is within the system, like a Hilbert space. Mathematics is not made of all theorems, conjectures. So within that, two sets, something is hidden there. And the second part that I would sort of respond to the question, your very deep question that you have, is when I can think of the great physicist Paul Dirac. When he said, the way I understand the equation, what an equation means is when I can figure out the characteristics of the equation, when the equation solves without really solving it, and figure out the circumstance under which why that part is not solving, then I understand. Now, that says he has the subtleness to look at the whole system, as well as the particulars within the system. And the particular systems can be infinite. Okay? And the infinite, what I learned from the human scholarship is that for the moment, the way to address that is to start with the principal analysis. And mapping that method to the way I do is I see three principal dimensions: the physical causes, the institutional causes, and the causes ideas. I give you some initial evidence. And by the way, I should also give the empirical study that you did, okay? That in a way underlines the claim that I have: wealth is energy and energy is wealth. You did 100 years work of energy use, and R square is so high, right? And also there are some perturbations, but I think it's very natural because of the human errors or what have you. If no perturbations, then I say, you must lie to me. You know, this is not human stuff. So the way we do, I would recommend doing that is to start with the sort of principal building blocks, physical. We can look at the engines. Institution, you imagine 3 dimensions where you have people here, you have people here, you have people here, you have different reconfiguration of that, such that, well, is there a better optima? And the way, at least very roughly speaking, but in a very powerful way, is those small market-oriented countries, okay, still have a higher level of economic development. It is for emerging markets like China to learn. And the third way is to look at the human mind. I use the very rough way to measure the sort of the smartness of human beings, to map the very frontier of the creative human mind. The other way is to look at the energy that our mind, our brain consumes. My reading of the cutting edge literature tells me our brain weighs less than 5% of the total body weight, okay? The range 2 to 5. But every day, it consumes energy, 25% of total energy that you take into that. That is sort of the brain energy that empowers the invisible stuff, silently empowers our creative mind. That, to me, is the ultimate source of creativity. Innovation is lower end, okay, of the wealth that we generate. And I'm so happy you are here. And as now I said of some of the skeletons, but as I mentioned in the paper, we are on our way. Hopefully that will give rise to a long list of researches, empirical or theoretical, to modify a little bit, that will get us closer to understand, okay, real understanding of the causes of the wealth of nations. And by the way, I think it's Lucas, a great economist, who said, questions relate to these, why some nations develop whereas others stagnated, has deep implications for the welfare, well-being of a human being. Once you start to think of that question, you will have no time for anything else. This is a very, very deep puzzle that we need to collaborate globally, as I said, under the giant umbrella of Republic of Letters. Invisible College, open science, such that we get closer to that secret. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you. I have another question now from remote, from Emiliano Ippoliti, who is professor of logic at University of Rome. Emiliano, are you connected?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So
okay,
please go on with your question to Professor Fortune.
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, Professor, for your rich talk and many ideas. And I have a question or comment. The question is about the role of financial systems in your model. In what is, if any, the role of financial systems in the economic growth? And so if you have a way of formalizing this role, since that's an important issue, for instance, that is affecting a lot of monetary policy models made by the central banks to understand how the growth will unfold. So that's my question. And the comment is about the notion of heuristics. And I think that it's a notion which has an important literature in philosophy, economics, psychology. And so maybe it would be helpful to clarify what definition of heuristics you are using in your theory. So that's I mean, a comment and a question. So thank you very much for your talk.
Okay.
Grazie. Emiliano, please go on.
Very briefly. Okay. Well, the way I measure that, I said those, I'm not satisfied with that at the moment, but hopefully we can improve. And the first part of your question about what I would sort of call one of the most abstract markets, okay? Even though I say it's horizontal, but to point to the capital markets is very illuminating. And the way I see that, I do see a sort of hyper matrix of state, market, and society here. When I say state is rule of law or rule-based, very strong rule-based system in financial markets. And for the time being, it seems to be, it's backed by common law system, okay? Not the continental law, not Islamic law, not the Confucius law, common law system when you look at the financial markets. And here, community, it's global community. If the financial system is global, it's mean long distance, okay? Then markets, the market operation. So it's marketization, globalization, or legalization or rule of law that support a vibrant, not perfect, financial markets. You see rise and up downs of financial markets. Financial markets globally all have problems, but if you follow their performance systematically, those financial markets supported by the three things that I mentioned tend to have better performance. And that support the general framework that I set up. Given the same level of energy, can you raise efficiency?
Thank you. Another question here. Can you give him the... May you introduce yourself for the recording?
As humanists, I've been strongly fascinated by your presentation, and for what I've understood, I think it's really convincing, this idea of a perspective, like searching for an utopia, which we are longing for, and we are marching toward that direction, although we know that we will not reach exactly that point, but we are working. But mathematical formula, probably because you used very many philosophical concepts, I think it would be useful to clarify if there is a side, a point for ethics. Because when we speak of growth, we have also to clarify, because it means I have the right to possess 5 big cars, and other person in the world will be not put in the condition even to survive. Well, the globalization will be unacceptable in that way, and that we need in this aspect to find a point, an ethical point of agreement on what we are looking for, because on the other side, the idea of the development, of course, only for those who can, and this is unfortunately what we are observing. And in this respect, I have to say that the role of China is a stabilizing role in this moment of, in my opinion, of interesting rationality, probably because you have to balance different problems inside, and you have the problem to offer millions of persons every year a higher level of reasonable way of life. So this is an enormous success. But I think if you could just dedicate a few observations on this aspect, I think are relevant for many persons here who work more on the historical, legal, and the ethical side. Thank you.
Okay. Found still a question. My response to that, my model, if you look at deeply, implies justice, ethical considerations. Because if you think of a nation, an entity try to catch up with the best arrangements, okay, state, market, and society, that itself will imply justice. Because in that setup, state is always larger than zero. Society larger than zero. Market larger than zero. Take that as a theorem, okay? Then the question is, what is the best configuration? Now, Adam Smith was very insightful. In his book of The Wealth of Nations, an inquiry into the nature of the causes of wealth of nations, he spent about 100 pages, depending on the edition, on the role of state, the role of the state. And he mentioned the three great duties of the state. Three: security, probably external, okay? But you can think of internal as well, okay? The second part, social justice. Without spelling out the specific list, but it's arguable globally. But with the same amount of the thermal energy, you are the ones who figure that out. Well, sensitive to the history, probably, okay? Then the last one, public works. And he specifically talked about education. If a specialization is so high, he imagined a world where everyone is a robot. It's become meaningless. So education is part of that. So as I said, the concerns students have, great concerns, is embedded in the framework that I have, you know, because we need to, well, I would also add, what is the ultimate source that drives humans towards wealth, quote unquote? But a better way, when I was working with another Nobel laureate, Phelps, we agree, not the average person, the great giants, they were driven by eudaimonia. As Aristotle would say, eudaimonia is the Greek philosophy concept of happiness, quote unquote, but it's more powerful, right? And defined as the activity of the human soul in pursuit of excellence. And that's actually the ultimate source of a human creativity. So that, in a way, is consistent with the Maslow's 5 pyramids at the very top, sort of. Not the very down at the bottom of the pyramid. It's just the material things, money. And that is too utilitarian. So far, the economic model probably is erred on being too much on the side of being utilitarian. Not spiritual enough. Not spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you, Fujun. Are there any other questions? Or somebody else is? Giuliano? Sì, ma questo non posso farlo io. Non ha chiesto. Is any other questions here? Or if not, let me have just a few words of conclusion. I love Fujun mix of heretoclite systems of judgments in philosophy and so on. Globally, this is not a critique. I never heard anything similar to you since the times of Feuerbach, or materialism, I say. It's just refreshing in some sense. So anyway, I'm not an expert in your field, so I don't want to feel too tranchant. But it's true that the question you put yourself, why some nations grow, why some other nations don't grow, that was Adam Smith's question. And of course, it's such a large question that most of economics don't want to hear about that. It's too big. So, and of course, when you ask yourself two big questions, who I am, why I'm still alive, of course, the risk is that you give solutions that can be criticized. But the alternative is to take just narrow questions where you have more certainty, but irrelevance. So I deeply appreciate the fact that you, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, 1776, after some years, you're just putting the same question of Adam Smith, trying to put together the economic and institutional questions, of course, with concepts coming from natural sciences. Mm-hmm. As we know, translating natural sciences concepts in social sciences is always very problematic. Auguste Comte, Professor Teg is a big expert over that. Auguste Comte tried to do it. Jean Stuart Mill tried. I'm an old man. Another my friend was Georgescu Reagan. I met him at the end of his life, but several years, very intensive. Georgescu Reagan tried to put thermodynamics into economics. He was a physicist, by the way. He did wonderful studies. So, but of course, each time it come out that the argument is so large that people decide to stop. But the importance of a solution depends from the importance of the question. And the question you are posing to us is so relevant that we thank you for this. But I see Pierluigi Contucci there.
Yeah, after your observation, Angelo, I must add something else, which is what Angelo said is probably it was in some of our minds here in the audience, but there is a novelty, you know, because science has made big progresses in the last 50 years. In particular, there is the theory of complex systems that add very, very important tools to this kind of investigation. It's not true that science only deals with the ballistic motion of projectiles, okay, or with electromagnetism, because this theory of complex system, of which Giorgio Parisi is a very, very important example, has left now it's almost 30 years that it has left the realm of physics and went to economics and the social sciences. So while I keep the same attitude that Angelo explained in his comments, and the same admiration that he has for you for raising these very general questions, there is opportunity to use new tools that were not used before, in particular, new view of thermodynamics that was not there before. So cheer up, and I think it's a great research team.
Yeah, and let me add some comments to what you have already said. I do see wave-like movements even when we watch the rise and the fall of universities. Okay, universities, universitas. Okay, universe. One way to go deeper is to go by specialize. That follows the deep hunch that Adam Smith had. Specialization, he used the analogy of ping. Specialization vis-a-vis non-specialization. Efficiency goes up. Okay? Economics is driven by two concerns. One is efficiency. The other is welfare. Welfare, it's moral science. Okay, And the way to do that is for Adam Smith is specialization. And that, to me, has much to do with the way that Descartes thinks. Okay, Descartes' way is for us to understand the world is to take things apart first. But that's the first part of the move. The second part, to reassemble. What's wrong with the current going of universities is that they only care about specialization. Forget about the second part. Okay, it is when you look at an orchestra, violin, different sections of that. Okay, eventually you can be specializing in one part, everyone specialized, but they need to work together so that you have a higher level of that harmony, love of harmony towards the perfection. But eventually that will take, if the piece is already given, a great conductor to put every part together, okay? But above him is the great composer. And the great university is not just to train, quote unquote, but to educate great composers at the end of the day. And the world at the current stage need great composers because it seems the world is falling apart, okay? Everyone thinks in their own echo chambers without the great vision. In spite of the differences, are there better ways to hold them together as a gradual process? But of course, the model does not claim that will be the necessary way to go. I'm open-minded, and empirical evidence seems to support initially. Humans went zigzag, and at the times, they will backpedal. But if we can make that explicit in the hope, when the key decision makers are aware of that, we may increase the chance of composing greater music, harmony, so that that we increase both the efficiency and the welfare of everyone on this earth. So that is sort of a great hope that I have as a scholar, not as a decision maker.
Thank you, Fujun. Thank you very much. Thank you to the colleagues and the other, I see a nice delegation of Chinese people here, which is very good for us. We are very glad. And you know, you are a fellow of this academy now. So a fellow means you are allowed to send memories to this academy. So this way just to come to give a talk, to participate, to have a meeting, but you can cooperate with your academy by sending paper, communications. That was the way in old times before internet and telephones. This academy had Voltaire, as I told you, amongst the members, and did correspond. So please keep us, feed us with food about what you are doing, because I think this is such interesting perspective. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Bye.
Thank you.